My name is Emily. I'm the OSM Vista for the Oakham Watershed Partnership in Uray. I'll be moderating the first session of the San Juan Mining Conference with our 5 fantastic speakers. And our first speaker is Bruce Stover. He is the director of the inactive and active mines from the, let me say that again, the director of Office of Active and Inactive Mines. And he'll be talking about how he works with a variety of partners to reclaim abandoned mines all over Colorado. So with that, I'll let him talk.
Don't keep me on time. I'm not used to this headset deal here. Bear with me a sec. Down somewhere. Well, thanks. It's really good to be here today. Had a pretty good trip. It was way better than I thought it was going to be getting out of Denver in the Front Range yesterday, so I actually got here early. I'm actually speaking on behalf of Loretta Pineda today, who is really sad she couldn't be here. She had some issues that came up at the very end. This thing's going to drive me nuts. She had some issues that came up at the end with a board meeting that lasted into 6 o'clock last night. There's actually a story in the Durango Herald today about the results of that board meeting, so she was not able to attend, but does send her regrets, and she really wishes she could be here. We had a lot of fun at the conference last year when we had it in Silverton. My name is Bruce Stover. I'm the director of the Abandoned and Inactive Mine Reclamation Program with the Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety in Denver, which is under the Department of Natural Resources. I started out in the mining business as an exploration geologist in Alaska, but that was right at one of these cycles in the mining industry where pretty much everything, right after I started out, tanked. So I had to find some other ways of making a living, and so I ended up sort of in a roundabout way, working for the state of Colorado. I've also been a mining services contractor back in the past too, so for the last 30 years, I've been involved with mining in one form or another. What I'm going to talk about today is some of the projects that the Colorado DRMS has done over the last probably 20 years, and how the reclamation that we do is really focused on what communities want, and specifically what landowners want. And again, just to reiterate, this is the AML section of our division. So what we do is we are looking at addressing the hazards and environmental issues from abandoned and inactive or inactive legacy mines. And those terms are very confusing sometimes to people. There really isn't any such thing as an abandoned mine on private property because somebody owns it and it's not abandoned. Abandoned mines really may only be prospects on Forest Service or BLM property where they're truly never developed into anything more than a prospect. So we like to use the term inactive mines, and we work very closely with mining property owners. And what we're talking about here, to define what legacy mining is, it's stuff that was operated prior to 1977 that never had any kind of permit or any kind of reclamation obligation because there weren't any laws back then. This is a compilation map of all of the sites that we've worked on since about 1985. You can see that it sort of masks the Hardrock mineral belt through Colorado. Also a lot of work in the coal fields. You see, you can figure out where all the minerals and mining are. Not too much, obviously, going on out in the eastern plains because most of the mining took place in the high country. And basically, this map has, if you blew it up and got in closer and closer and closer, kind of like a Google Earth thing, there's over 9,300 dots on that map since we started our program. So the challenges that we face are when we come into an area and there's projects to be done, we have some funding from the Office of Surface Mining and other places to do it. What does the community want? It's always focused on the needs of the community, what the community would like to see, and it's very different, let me tell you, with different counties and different communities and different places around the state, their values are quite different. We'll have communities where they want to reclaim and they're not so worried about some of the historical old waste rock piles or waste coal piles, and they want those reclaimed back to either agricultural lands or different uses. And then we have other communities where that old coal waste pile is part of history and we don't want it to do anything and we want to leave it alone, and as long as it's not causing any environmental problem, we leave it alone. So the connections that we have, and that I'm going to be talking about and showing a lot of slides on, that we touch, these interests are safeguarding the mine hazards. That's really our bread and butter. And this is a voluntary program where DRMS, working with the landowner, a lot of times it's a private mining claim owner or the Forest Service or the BLM. The landowner calls the shots. They're the ones who dictate what they want, or if they don't want anything. A lot of times we talk to people and they're like, no, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it ourselves. But we do a lot of safeguarding of mine hazards. And environmental restoration in some communities and areas. Historic preservation is very big. And then the last thing that we've done a lot of it in the last 20 years is partnering and collaboration on all these various projects. So what I'm going to be doing now is working through a bunch of slides just to show some examples of some of these projects that we've worked on all around the state. So the public safety, the hazardous mine openings. And basically what we're doing is focusing on remaining hazardous mine openings that are dangerous to people, tourists, hikers. It used to be back 20 years ago, we worked on all the stuff around the towns and we thought no one's ever going to be up in the mountains. These ones are way far away, they're so far down our priority list, we don't even have to worry about it. But as anybody can tell you, in the last 20 years with ATVs and the tourist industry in Colorado, there is no place in Colorado now, even at the tops of the mountains, where people aren't getting to. So all of these types of hazards that are still out there. And these are just some examples of some past ones that we've done up here, but some that are remaining out there. We continually work on about 400 to 500 of these every year. And again, every one of these is with the permission of the landowner or working with the landowner to determine what type of reclamation they want to see. The reclamation, many times in hard rock mining areas, is not permanent. The landowners usually want to maintain some access to their claim or their mine if they want to, so we use systems of shaft caps that could be removed. This is an adit here. This is actually a coal mine here, but you see these are non-permanent closures. This is a stope up above Georgetown. It was closed using grating and steel beams. The other thing we've done a lot of in the past is we use precast concrete panels that we set over stopes and mine shafts. And of course, if a mining company ever needed to come in and lift these back off, they could do that with heavy equipment. But the main idea is to keep the casual tourist or hiker, from getting into these things and getting in trouble with bad air or falling down winzes. They don't even realize it when they're on some of these that they could be trespassing going into these. It's against the law in Colorado to enter into an abandoned or inactive mine unless you're the landowner or you have the permission of the landowner. So the other focus that we've done a lot of project work on is environmental restoration. We've done a lot of work on coal mines, the big coal loadouts, and down around the Raton Basin and Trinidad, and down around Durango, these coal fields, and even up around Steamboat. A lot of these areas where old coal waste piles and loadouts have been repurposed. And this is an example from Brookside, which is down near Canyon City. Big coal mining center. The Canyon City coal field was a very large producer back in the heyday. You can see all this coal waste and coal slack and weeds and undergrowth. They got a GOCO award and wanted to turn this sort of blighted coal waste area into a park, and they did. It's now called the Brookside Park. No, what was it called? Spring Creek Park. Spring Creek comes down through the Brookside mine. So they repurposed this whole area. They got a GOCO grant. We helped them get rid of all the coal waste. There were 3 mine adits that had to be sealed. These were permanently sealed with backfill and concrete. They also built a system of trails from varying in different degrees, from easy walking trails. I think they even have some handicap trails. And what you're seeing here is they had the Youth Corps help them build the hard trail, which they basically carved out up through the sandstone bluffs that climbs up above the whole park and gives a pretty good view. So they were able to involve some youth work groups in this type of project. The Smith Hill project is one up. It's also a coal mine reclamation project up there, Crested Butte. There was about 2 acres of wetlands down here that were disrupted by a lot of coal slack and waste. This is where the railroad tracks came in and they loaded out anthracite coal back in the turn of the century. So a lot of this waste had gotten down in and around the wetlands. The idea here was to repurpose this and continue a trail system. So you can see a couple of shots here where the coal waste is all in and amongst the wetlands. So it was a wetlands and environmental restoration project. Just outside of Crested Butte, I think this photo here is looking to the southwest. Downstream, Crested Butte would be down this way. And so the contractors got in a lot of erosion control. They scooped out all the coal waste and reestablished wetlands. And increased the acreage of the wetland habitat. They restored the hydrology of the wetlands. And of course, the coal waste is not continually eroding and running downstream to impact other areas down below. And this is going to be part of a trail system that the Crested Butte folks are using and building through that area. I think we finished that up last year. I'm not going to talk too much about the peanut mine because we've also got some more detailed talk on that a little bit later. But this is just an overview. This was done a few years ago. This is a very interesting site because not only did we have a Hardrock mill at this site that had some Hardrock mine waste, you can see the ponds and stuff, but it was also the site of a coal mine and coal refuse area too. Again, anthracite mining that was around Crested Butte in those days. And this is just an overview site showing one of these waste piles, what it looked like before and after the reclamation. This is an aerial shot right after the reclamation was done, showing the vegetation coming in. Here's that loop trail, lower loop trail coming through. So this area was repurposed again as historic mining purposes and also as recreational use. And we continue to do a little bit of vegetation monitoring at this site. It's come back in really well. These kids here are doing some vegetation monitoring here, looking at the density and the types of plants that are on there. So we had really good community involvement there with the CVLT, and it was a really successful project that the community was very supportive of. The UTLA project right up the road here, this is the Tailings project that was done back in 2009, and if you may recall, what was up here was these ponds were farther up valley, actually upstream from the UTLA mill, where the mill tailings were flumed up valley and deposited in a series of ponds or pits in here. And back in those days, the ATV and motorcycle folks would come roaring off the road and drive around in this stuff, and it was right up on top of a bedrock bench just above Henson Creek. So there was some water quality issues with these deposits of metal tailings. The approach that BLM came up with, because they really couldn't haul this stuff off-site, it would have been too expensive to try to excavate it and haul it away. There's really no good repository site up there. They used a technology that was pioneered in Canada and some other places, where we simply turned all that fine-grained tailings waste, mixing it with other mine rock that was brought in from other mine sites that had some waste rock piles along streams, and mixed it with cement. And it forms what we call a paste. You can see here's the batch mixer, this is the pump that blends it all. So we basically turn that whole tailings pile into a solid block that met TCLP, and it was basically a landfillable solid that could stay above the Henson Creek and not have any kind of water quality problems. And then simply made a repository for that material. So this is a shot looking down valley. Underneath this mound, right after we finished it here, is this giant lump of, it's basically solid concrete. And then you can see the vegetation as time went by. This is right after we did it with the mulching, and we used a lot of the material on site and tree stumps. You can see the vegetation starting to come in. I think we had some trees that we planted, and some of them were successful. I think we've done some more plantings and stuff up there, but this last shot here, I think this is the last one, and Tara can probably say whether it looks a lot, but it's really starting to come in and looks pretty good. So that's the UTLA tailings, and there's no more of these ponds and erosion, dust, and wind blowing this stuff around and getting it into the creek. And then the last environmental restoration project to talk about was the Victor, down by Victor, Colorado, which is the Milsap Tailings project. This is about 40 acres of beach sand like materials that was from the turn of the century. The Independence Mill operated in Victor, and they flumed the tailings down valley a little ways. And of course you can see over 100 years of erosion, wind erosion. There's dunes up in here in the trees. But the main problem here was this stuff was all eroding and running down 4 Mile Canyon and causing a lot of problems for some of the ranchers. Their cattle were in this stuff and it would coat the sides. It was more of a sedimentation problem. Luckily, the ores up at Cripple Creek don't have a lot of pyrite, and so the acid mine drainage wasn't as big of a concern as just the erosional inundation of the creek down below. So we came in with, and this is just a shot here showing some of these giant canyons that had carved through when the tailings dams had been breached by erosion. And this stuff would blow. You can see the sand dune and sand that would blow up into the trees on the lee side of this big deposit. And this gives you an idea of the scale of this stuff. It is, again, about 40, maybe even more than that, acres of this fine sandy tailings. But the partnerships that we formed with Cripple Creek and Victor Mining Company allowed us to do this for less than $1 million. I think it was between $800,000 and $1 million. And the reason was we got cover soils that were left over, excess spoils, really, that were hauled down here from the CC&V gold mine. And so we had a trucking company bring in this really good soil to cap everything with. And we partnered with the Department of Corrections, their heavy equipment training program. So that a lot of the equipment, well, all of the equipment was run and operated by the prisoners that were learning a trade to reduce recidivism so that when they got out, they had a skill to market. So this project was very successful. If you remember, I'll just get back here to what it looked like before. If you notice this little tree right in here and that little stand of aspen, keep your eye on that. That's Pikes Peak up there. This is taken from the same vantage after all this work. This is what it looks like now. And again, these cover soils were fantastic to work with. We had lots of boulders and cobbles that make better habitat in there for small animals and raptors. You can see Pikes Peak up here. And this is right after we did it. And we've gotten some aerial photos. You can hardly tell that those tailings were there anymore. This is a ground level shot of the vegetation, and it's come back so well since 2008, I think, or 7 we did that. I can't remember. All runs together. We've pulled the fences out, and it's now rangeland. So the farmer is now using this area for rangeland vegetation. So this is another very good project that we just are really proud about. So to summarize what the program has done since about 1985 for mine hazards, again, about 9,300 openings that we've safeguarded. We're doing about 350 to 400 mine openings every year with the funding levels that we've got now. That may fall off a little bit as funding levels change. And we've reclaimed about 2,000 acres of previously disturbed mine lands that were not permitted, that never had any mining permits. So the next piece I want to talk about is the historical and cultural resources preservation. Contrary to what I've heard, up in some mining camps around Leadville, DRMS has never taken down or destroyed or done anything to detract from the historical resources that are at any of these mine sites. All of our closures are designed with the landowner. If we have a shaft head frame or something like that, we always work to kind of preserve that system with the closure that we develop. And the main thing that we're really concerned about is the loss and deterioration. And we're losing some of these fantastic sites just to weathering and the ravages of time. This is one of the first silver mills in all of Colorado, up near St. John, which is near Montezuma, Colorado, in Summit County, looked like at the turn of the century. And this is pretty much what it looks like today. There's really not much left of it. And buildings like this, if we can get there and preserve them and stabilize them as part of a reclamation project, that's one of our larger goals. We have a staff of 3 cultural resource historians that on all of our projects, even the closure projects or whatever, there's recordation, interpretation of everything that's left over from mining history. This is all cataloged, recorded. We turn it into the State Historic Preservation Officer. So one of the things that we are also getting when we're doing these 350 to 400 closures a year is we're documenting the history that's at those sites. And that's all going into the State Historic Preservation Officer's files. So we have really good examples of what was there, and we strive to have some sort of a reclamation project or a closure that preserves that historical heritage. And a lot of times contractors know that we'll have in our bid documents, you can't disturb this, don't go over here, leave this alone, so the contractors know and we can preserve that site even though we do the reclamation. I'm going to show you a couple examples of some sites we're really proud of working together on to do preservation and stabilization. This is one of my favorites here. This is the Independence mine head frame. If any of you have been down to the town of Victor, this dominates the landscape there. This and the Vindicator and the Ajax at the top of Battle Mountain. But this is a fantastic, huge timber head frame. One of the largest timber head frames, if not the largest timber head frame in the whole state of Colorado, because this is a very deep mine there. We came in and worked with the local group there and CC&V, and were able to do some stabilization and put in a big fence around this to keep people from climbing in it and getting around some of the shafts and stope areas in there. The fence is modeled after the fence that's around the Mint in Denver. So it's a big wrought iron fence that looks sort of like a period type of wrought iron fencing. And then, of course, the old 100 boarding house. We helped assist the local San Juan County historic preservation folks down there to put new roofing on the boarding house and kind of renovate that and prevent it from deteriorating to the point where we would lose this amazing historical structure. And I've gone up there several years. I like to go up there every couple of years and check on it, and it's still doing pretty well. I think there's a few things little maintenance items that there's some things that the wind pulls on this thing pretty hard. But you can see you're looking down from the site, and the town of Silverton is down there. You can actually see this from town. So that was a big undertaking. We're really proud of that. Head frames, we restore and stabilize head frames whenever we have the chance. And this is just an example. You guys, all of you, I'm sure, if you've ever been on I-70, have looked up and seen this a million times. This is the Smuggler head frame. This is I-70 right by Georgetown. Georgetown and Silver Plume, and this thing was pretty much ready to fall down. People got very concerned, the locals. We contacted the landowner. The shaft was collaring out around and taking in the kicker legs and the head frame. So as part of the reclamation project, we straightened up and stabilized and resurrected, hopefully for many years to come, the Smuggler mine head frame. The Coeur d'Alene mine was a very historic site. This is an internal shaft. The shaft head frame is actually enclosed in this building here, but we worked with the folks up at Central City. That is and now a historic, I believe on the historic register, National Historic Register of Places, the Coeur d'Alene dominates the hillside above the town of Central City. So that's been done. That was done years ago. And then the one that you guys are probably going to see tomorrow, we did, Karen Taffy did this, I believe, last summer, was the head frame stabilization and restoration at the UTLA. So, here's what it was looking like. You can see the kicker leg here was starting to come apart, and the whole thing was tilting and getting ready to fall down. So it's part of the safety closure, and you can see what the great job that Tara and her contractors did. The new kicker legs and restored the UTLA head frame as part of the whole project. Here's some examples of some other buildings that we want to try to save that we're working with Forest Service and local. We have almost, just like we have watershed groups, we also have historical groups in just about every community and mining district in Colorado that are very, very interested in preserving the heritage that they have. And these are just a few examples of some other projects that we'll be working on. I think the Hoosier has already been stabilized. That's down by Cripple Creek. The Champion Mill is up near Leadville. We've got some project work going on there. And then one that we got in last year, I think it was last fall, right before winter, we actually stabilized and got a new roof on the Santiago Mill up above Georgetown and Clear Creek County. So again, this makes our jobs fun, is when we can coordinate and do historic preservation. And the last piece, how am I doing on time? 4 minutes. Okay, perfect. Is the project partnership piece. And this is a project we did last year, but the point of this sign is, if you had time to count, there's 13 partners and project people on this sign. And this includes mining company, Freeport-McMoRan, Copper and Gold, CDPHE, DRMS, Forest Service, EPA, Summit County, Trout Unlimited. I mean, most of our projects where we have these larger, we bring money and we bring expertise from a lot of different fields, and have a really good partnership on a lot of our restoration projects. The other partnerships we're able to provide is volunteer opportunities. We have a lot of communities where folks in the community want to get out and learn how to do water quality sampling, learn how to collect water, fish shocking, vegetation studies, and we can train people, and we really need the volunteers to help with that. So that's always something that we're looking forward to doing. And then youth opportunities, to try to involve young people in environmental restoration or just environmental, understanding the environment and how everything's interrelated. So we work very closely with Environmental Learning for Kids and Southwest Conservation Corps. This is some example of environmental learning for kids, ELK as they're known. We've tried to involve some of these kids to go out and help catalog or map or collect data on. This is a maintenance project where we're going back to see how, in this case, it's a concrete shaft panel, how it's doing. They're having fun dropping rocks down the mine shaft there. But again, water quality monitoring. Water quality monitoring, and this is some more of those kids building that trail down there at the Brookside Coal Mine project. And then we have been supporting VISTA for the last 4 or 5 years, the VISTA program. I'm not going to say too much about this because I think there's some other talks that touch on that, but the Western Hardrock watershed team have been key and instrumental on many of our projects, and they're partners on most of our environmental restoration type projects. I think this one was up at the Waldorf mine. Maybe, no, that might be in San Juan.
That's Palmetto.
Yeah, that's Palmetto. Okay, right. You're exactly right. So anyway, this is another one of our very important partners in a lot of our work, collecting data and getting projects online. And then, of course, other state agencies and local community groups. This is the crew that did that Milsap restoration project. You can see the town of Victor there in the background, and that Independence head frame is right there, and the Ajax is up at the top. So these guys were the ones that ran all the heavy equipment when we did that restoration of the tailings down there in Victor. So the remaining challenges for us are obviously we are a government agency, and flexibility and maintaining ways of dealing with this different communities and their needs and wishes. I mean, sometimes we're working with a community that's got years of careful planning, and it's a long drawn-out process of how that's all going to happen. And other times we'll have someone call in and say, oh my God, something's falling down, can you help us? It's like an emergency, or we have to be able to react on something that gets some legs or momentum very quickly, and we have to have ways of doing that. And sometimes that's a challenge for us, but we pride ourselves in usually being able to assist in any way. Competition for our severance tax dollars is always increasing. A lot of the funding that we're able to use for some of the hard rock preservation comes from the tax money that we get from oil and gas, molybdenum, gold, silver mining, all those tax dollars. We do get some of that we use, but there's a lot of other agencies with other missions that are after that kind of funding too. And then again, for all of us, just look up and see what other people are doing. I mean, I think this conference is a really good example of that, is, local communities looking up, looking over the mountain, what are other watershed groups doing, what's going on. But we need to challenge ourselves to keep looking up and recognize what other connections and partnerships there are. And frankly, partnering with other people, it does take work. It's not something that happens by itself, and you got to keep at it. And again, it's repurposing these mine lands for the different community needs, and being able to have a dialogue with that local community and know what they want to do, and be able to help them with that. And it's very diverse across Colorado. So I'm available if you guys have any questions or anything later on. We'll have the panel discussion, but thank you very much.